I drew 50 pages of manga, then drew the same 50 pages again and again, every chapter, every single time. Until one bald manga man said that,
You don't draft my manga at all.
and my entire workflow collapsed. As the one-man team behind the Manga Drive, every line counts. And the more time you spend fiddling around with one drawing, the more your quality of work starts to suffer. Now that may seem counterintuitive, right? But trust me, it'll all make sense. There's even a study behind it. These are the first 4 chapters of my manga. And all the way until the end of the 4th, I would always repeat this process of sketch 50 pages, ink 50, shade 50, next chapter. Sketch 50 pages, ink 50, shade 50, you get the point. And meanwhile, this process served me well while it lasted. There were some major issues that would result in the quality of my manga suffering. Let me give you those cold-hearted, ugly truths. The time spent between every pass. This is self-explanatory, but you can imagine the time you would have to spend drawing something, anything, versus the time you would have to spend drawing that same thing 2 more times in a row. Second, not being able to fix any mistakes until I got to a new chapter. Here's a very real example. I had no idea that if you have to change a scene, that you would have to do it above this halfway line of the page. If you want to switch to a different scene below this line, that's no bueno, mi amigo. Bad layout. Learned it late. I couldn't fix it. Last but not least, and as an artist, this one really stings the most. Art muscles lacking behind other ones. Now, what do I mean? If sketching, inking, and shading are all separate muscles, once you concentrate on one of these muscles, the others naturally fall off of practice. Now, this doesn't suddenly mean that I can't sketch at all after inking and then shading for a while. It does mean that by the time I got to a new chapter, my sketching would have suffered to the point that where we may end up with panels like this. Now, these may not seem so horrible, but let's compare them with some panels from the ends of the previous chapters, and there you have it. Now, all 3 of these factors have already convinced me, but I didn't know to what just yet. Until I saw this bold manga man, who wasn't me, pop onto my screen and say,
Don't draft my manga at all. I just go like on the spot drawing and then go to the next panel and the next panel.
What? You what? I couldn't believe my eyes, or ears, or both, or whatever. Because yo, this is what Ody draws, and he releases it on an insane schedule, compared to my stuff, which drops in once in about 3 to 4 months, if we're lucky. So, if I was going to take advice from anyone, it was going to be him. And this was right around the time where I was finishing the 4th chapter and starting with the 5th. Perfect timing for a switch in the process, to try something new and experiment. And this also coincided with another switch I wanted to make, going from black and white to full color. And so, that's exactly what I did. I finished chapter 4, made a cover for the 1st volume, and started my process on the 5th with this new shiny tool. At first, it was quite exciting, but then it really quickly became very grueling. By page 3, I was already overwhelmed, excitement gone, with new tools that I wasn't familiar with, in deep waters, all by myself, and pain. Sketching does not take as much time as finishing a whole page from start to finish with colors. So I thought that by the time I got to page 4, in this new no sketching way, I would have already been done with the sketching of more than half of the chapter by now, right? So, what time was I saving? However, I knew I had to keep at it. You can't just try a new diet for a few days and then switch it up if it doesn't work. You have to give it time to settle in, marinate, to see if it really works. And sure enough, with time, those art muscles we talked about earlier, they got warmed up. And now, without any big setbacks, they would all finally get to gradually grow together. And the proof is in the pudding. I'm showing you panels not to spoil the whole pages, but do expect big things in chapter 5. As a mangaka, the consideration of quality versus quantity always comes up. The dilemma of perfecting a single drawing versus pumping out as much as possible. But this always reminds me of that one potter or a ceramic artist who assigned their students into 2 groups, along with the task of making as many pots as possible versus making the best pot possible. And this is that study that I mentioned before. And over time, the better pots were being produced by the group that was tasked with prioritizing quantity. Because, as we all know, practice makes perfect. Now, I'm not saying I wasn't practicing before. I was, but I wasn't finishing. And if the pages are my pots, now I get to show out. throw one on the wheel, glaze it, fire it, boom, next. Whereas before, I would have to sketch, then ink, then blah, blah, blah. You get the point. Messy process. It was tedious and boring. As a final remark, I do want to point out that my previous process is only more tedious and time consuming because of the fact of me operating alone. If a mangaka, if they have the means to and choose to, can just draw the sketches and pass the rest on to their assistants, that's perfectly fine. So I'm not saying to antagonize any one way of making manga, but rather, if this was something you also seem to struggle with in your own process, and not just in manga, but to whatever it may apply to in your own life. If you're stuck and you feel that it is time to switch it up a bit, try this. Try this Ody way of, fuck the sketch or the draft or whatever. Go all in, balls deep. Just show up and show out. Thanks, Ody. If you enjoyed that, do all that YouTube shit and read my manga, first link in the description. And fixing my workflow was one thing, but fixing my body while drawing full-time manga, that's a whole nother story. And here's exactly how I did that.